interesting thoughts from different perspectives on sustainability and scale, and I think just now what we're going to try and do is maybe provide a perspective on what we often consider the foundation of sustainability and scalability is how strong are systems on which you expect to build these types of programs or interventions. I'm very fortunate to have quite a diverse panel for the session today. So we have Pratnya, who works with the World Food Program in a monitoring and evaluation role. Jayesh, who works with NRM, which is a consulting organization that works around livelihood, natural resources, land governance, and Dr. Raman, who works with the Public Health Foundation of India, leading a lot of their work on governance and related issues. So I think, again, it's interesting, people coming from three very diverse areas. My name is Anand Sinha. I work with the Packard Foundation primarily on work related to population and reproductive health area of work. So the way we've organized it today is I'm going to ask my panelists to sort of make their remarks and their viewpoints on the topic that we're thinking about, which is really strengthening systems. And then we'll try and open it up for questions. We've been mindful of the fact that we would like to give the audience a chance to sort of interact and make this more discussive rather than us taking the whole hour just talking amongst ourselves. So we're going to try and keep it short, maybe 10 minutes each, and then we will try and have an interactive session on the topic with you. So we flipped coins, and Dr. Raman is going to go first. If you don't mind.
So, thanks, Sinha and when it comes to scalability and sustainability, when it comes to building systems, it's so many. It's bigger. So, when it comes to scalability and sustainability, what are the ingredients? Yes, we know that scale, size does matter. And we also know that sustainability is essential. But sometimes, why the scalability and sustainability is not coming across in various systems building activities or development programs? So, I am seeing it from a governance perspective. So, setting the context, we have to see scalability and sustainability in the systems building context. In implementation, scale is something which Amati Sinha was talking about, scale of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and the number of people in India. If we see the numbers, it's quite large. But when it comes to the other point that Amitabh Kant told today, that each the 100 flowers need to bloom. So each sector, each area needs to have their own smaller programs, innovations and all that. So the scale varies for implementation and also for research. When it comes to research, the scale is something very different from the scale for implementation. And then what is system? System is it self-organizes, it adapts, and it evolves with time. It includes all organizations, institutions, resources, and people. And when it comes to health systems, its primary purpose comes to improving health, and it also has to look at influencing the determinants of health. And there are building blocks defined by WHO, 6 building blocks, but something I am adding here in the blue line, you can see research and evidence uptake, training and public education. These are also something to be seen as the important building blocks, though they are not officially classified. And when it comes to India and other low and middle income country settings, we are, Sania Nishtar of Pakistan, she says that this is something called a mixed health system syndrome. Meaning our regulatory systems are weak, our public health systems are much compromised, and profit driven and irrational private systems are driving the market, and diverse formal and informal providers are providing services. And private and public, the distinction is a bit blurred. So this needs to be kept in mind while we discuss about scale and sustainability. So let us see how health planning and financing in India is structured. What are the realities? After the coming of National Health Mission, the concept of bottom-up planning has been accepted. But when we see it in reality, centrally there is a committee that approves all the financing and all the plans and all that. Various structures are set up for that. So the concept of bottom-up planning not always fulfilled when the structures are approving it, not necessarily what the grassroots requirements are met while the plans are getting approved and the outlays are getting finalized. So the top-down decision making and tight finance allocations, can they deliver, is a question that we have to look at. Second, we have absence of long, medium-term and short-term planning frameworks. People call it finance framework or MTEF, medium-term expenditure framework. Many countries are having that, but in our country, we have a 5-year plan, which is a statement, wish list or statement, whatever. So we have not yet come into that concrete plan. And then research, evaluation, evidence generation, not yet prioritized. In a way, in place of evidence-based policy, we are into probably policy-based evidence. And then finance allocation, which is outlay driven, not always need based. We cannot actually adjust our food for the footwear, but that is what is happening. And then, if this is the situation, what are the kind of things which are missing? So here, you can see I've written it with complexity. So addressing complexity is a critical issue. Understanding complexity is something very important to do. So the traditional public health governance in our setup is hierarchical organization. It is designed to direct, control and even to prevent various interactions. So that is the design. But with this design, it's very difficult. It has to go beyond the epidemiological and economic analysis understanding. And it has to accept the nature and abilities of various interactions that is happening in the society, which may or may not affect the ongoing processes. So it has to prioritize efforts to influence those societal interactions. Unless we do that, it is possible that the systems building cannot happen. And then the new conceptual framework should replace traditional reduce and resolve kind of approaches. Everything we have a tendency to simplify things, but it is not possible to simplify always, because the systems are complex, the life is complex, real world is complex. That complexity needs to be addressed, and the design has to have abilities to look at those complexities. And then we have to understand, we have to plan, we have to implement, and we have to evaluate the complex adaptive systems rather than the simple structured system. So if you see the community health worker, the large ASHA program that we have set up as an example, that ASHA program, when we set it up, the decision making was not complexly understood, the complexity of decision making. We thought the guideline will be followed, but at the end of the day, when the ASHAs were selected, they were said you will get some performance-based incentives you have to do. So from the activist structure, it has all in a sudden become some kind of worker arrangement, and paradoxically they are called ASHA workers, even though the full form is the abbreviation is activist. So that is one example here. And then systems thinking. When we plan systems, it is important to have system thinking. That is the second element. It is the process of understanding how those things which are considered as systems influence one another within a complex entity or a larger kind of system. So there are, system thinking is a crucial kind of ingredient for any health system strengthening effort, and that is one thing missing in our context. So we have to decipher the complexity of the system, and we have to design or in evaluation. When we do interventions, we have to see the system thinking to improve health and health equity. And system thinking is also important, providing a way forward for operating complex and real-world settings. And we have to also use system thinking for opening pathways to identifying and resolving systems challenges. So we have to go beyond the usual input black box output kind of paradigm, and we have to start to account what is the system behavior and how to address it. And we have to actually apply the system thinking not only for evaluation intervention but also for research and evaluation. That is another. So if you see the safe abortion services as an example, we planned a very what you call system that if you set up medical setup, one day clinic at a primary health center or whatever, things will improve. But we have to also look at who are the people to come. If some adolescent girls are getting pregnant, what is the kind of arrangement that needs to be given for abortion services there? And if a person in ASHA, like a community health worker, is facing with that person, what is the confidentiality related issues? A lot of things need to be coming in while planning such interventions, wherein system thinking becomes important. And the third one is institutional support. So we cannot run any systems without adequate institutional support. There are a lot of them. I'm not reading all that. There are various things to look at in terms of setting up institutions. Various institutions need to be set up. We have to plan for system strengthening and also for growth to ensure proper response for higher and varying demands. And interlinkages, coordination, convergence, all these things need to be kept in mind while setting up institutions. Also, we have to understand what are the institutional constraints. What are the constraints when setting up, or the design issues of institution, how will we address them? That is another thing to look at. So if you see the village health committees, we have almost large number of lakhs of village health committees, 4 lakhs or so, are set up across the country, thinking that it will automatically function. Unless they have guidelines, unless they have training system, unless they have monitoring systems, unless they have a large number of personnel in different levels to look at what these committees are doing or not doing, things are not going to function. Just giving some 10,000 rupees and asking them to do whatever for the villages is not going to work. So that is another. Finally, resource adequacy. Resource adequacy here, human infrastructure is important, and then financial provisions for physical, material, and human resources. This is non-negotiable. Okay, we can be economic, but the quest for reducing cost should not lead to neglection or omission of essential components. That is something very important. So in our financial planning, what we miss is, we give the outlay, you do whatever you can, but this is what we have. That cannot be the issue. We have to actually look at what are the critical requirements there. And there is an argument that our systems are unable to spend. That is also not a correct argument. If you see after setting up the NHM, the systems have proved that they can kind of perform to optimum. As of now it is suboptimal, but it can be optimal if further systems for finance management can be added. So that is the resource adequacy is important. So again I am going to the total sanitation campaign example. The financial constraints or the resource constraints has made the latrine design in a way that it cannot be used. The size of the latrine, the money that we are providing. So we think that so the services for the poor cannot be poor services. That is one important issue to look at. So systems for poor cannot be poor systems. So we have to provide adequate resources for making those things. So that's all I want to make as of now. There are many other issues, but I am prioritizing these 4 areas. Thank you.
We'll come back if you have questions, just hold those and we'll come back to what. Pragya, would you like to go next, please?
Thank you, Anand, and good afternoon to you all. I have a few busy slides and some comments to make, so I'll try and stick to the 10 minutes time. Okay. So basically when we talk about scale up and sustainability, the major issues which actually come to our mind are like, now we have done the pilot successfully, now what? How government will take it on? And that's actually the problem. And that's where we actually have also, as an organization, World Food Program, we have also tried out lots of pilots without real success in terms of scale up. And a lot of learning which actually has emerged has finally gone into some kind of change at the organizational level. And I'd like to actually walk you through some of this as a case study. So all of you will agree that for India there is a development paradox which we always talk about. So while there is a huge, it is one of the fastest growing economy, there is huge manpower which is available, then there are lots of advances, like the production has really gone up. India has become a kind of self-sufficient country. For us, WFP, we really don't need to be here now because the food is not required in the country as such. However, we also have very large, one of the largest safety nets across the world, namely the targeted public distribution, the mid-day meal scheme, and ICDS. These three schemes actually cover almost entire Indian population through life cycle. In spite of that, we really have unacceptably high inequalities in terms of the inclusion and exclusion, in terms of social safety nets. The HDR and GHI really show very bad picture of India, which is again unacceptable. And the nutritional status is extremely bad in terms of stunting or wasting or undernutrition and huge micronutrient deficiencies. And we all know that being civil societies, if the organizations are other than government, we actually are very high on impact, but very low on scalability and sustainability. But if it is government organizations, they actually just scale up, but then there is no impact. So there is somewhere a paradox which really needs to be addressed. And where is the solution? There was an era probably, we were actually finding out the solutions, innovations, etc. And we created some islands of excellence. But now the most needed is how we sustain it, how we scale it up, and how the scalability is sustained. So, having said that, what is actually required is a complete paradigm shift in terms of thinking from the traditional approach to what is really required. Generally, if we talk about having a pilot, how does it really work? We know that we conceptualize an idea, an innovation which really has a potential to create impact. And generally that impact we actually have in mind, one, the donors, what they really require. Then, if the impact is created, then we just say that the government is not scaling it up. But then, the design itself, at times, because we have got funds, it is so resource intensive that the scalability is compromised. And so the thinking of scalability is not really at the conceptual stage. Then, the government involvement usually during the implementation is minimal. We know that as soon as government gets involved, the timelines which are committed to donors are going haywire. And that's where we usually try and see that the government is just kept informed but not involved. And then if we talk about the assessments, they are again which are suitable for us. At times it is like very concrete results in terms of, even we can go to the extent of RCTs. But then what it really takes to scale up, that is hardly really studied. And then advocacy is limited to sharing the results and the documents. So what we go with the government is like, these are the results, this is how the process documentation, this is how we did it, now you continue. It doesn't happen. At times, even the government comes out with some kinds of guidelines or some kinds of policy or some kind of ruling, GO, etc., saying that you do it this way. The order is there, as Mr. Raman said, that we created so many community level units. However, where is the quality? They need training. But where is the funds for training? Where is the capacity for training? So that entire approach of actually scale up has to be built up right at the inception stage. The government has to be on board. Then alignment and ownership of the government at each stage of the pilot. Then the quality of implementation as well as assessment. It has to be extremely rigorous and good. And then the degree of advocacy which is needed with the government, it has to be again extremely intense. And we'll come to this, that probably just the advocacy with the government doesn't help and what it really takes. So I'll just share an example, which is a Raigada project, which we did as a pilot in one of the, we can say that, backward districts of Odisha. Now this district is tribal. I have just drawn up a timeline here. You know that targeted public distribution system is one of the largest food security kind of safety net across India, implemented to cover now, as a part of an FSA, more than 800 million people. This actually was evaluated in 2005 by Planning Commission, and that was actually a kind of milestone because it actually put the numbers, saying, talking about the percentage of leakage in TPDS. The system existed, but then those who actually really deserved, they did not get the benefits. So in 2007, WFP actually did a assessment based on feasibility, what really ails the system, the supply chain assessment, where the major leakage happens, what actually could be the solutions, and with discussions with the government of India and Orissa government, a pilot was actually conceptualized. This pilot actually was implemented in coordination with the government, and there was only one technology partner, and the onus of entire implementation as well as handover and replication was with the government. The government machinery was used for biometric registration of the beneficiary. I'm talking about an era which is before Aadhaar. And so actually registering the number of beneficiaries to the tune of more than 1 lakh was a mammoth task in absence of infrastructure, because this was a Raigada and it was a kind of very remote tribal district, difficult to reach areas, difficult terrain. And then in spite of that, because the government machinery was used, panchayats were involved, this mammoth task could really be achieved. This pilot was implemented. This pilot, in fact, I would say that was a kind of used as a laboratory. We tried to try out many solutions. We actually tried the smart card solution. We tried even a card with a barcode on it. And the third was coupons for some of the remote rural areas. And each option was tried out. The purpose was basically to see that which technology is most feasible, which technology works, and in case if this has to be scaled up, which technology we will recommend for the government to take on. And government was part of the entire process. The initial MOU for this pilot actually had a clause saying that the government will hand it over, we take the handover of this project and implement it post, let's say, X number of years. So this kind of framework already existed. Using the same machinery of the government, it actually is a challenge. You will know that, implementing this process meant compromising the profit margins of the implementers. And so it was a huge challenge. However, we also learned during the time along with the government, because the first thing that we realized was as soon as the biometric based system is implemented, the profit margins of FPS owners are going to stop. They are the people who are actually the interface with the clients, and they are not going to get paid adequately. Then we did a viability analysis, financial viability analysis, and we found that they actually cannot run the business honestly. So we advocated with the government that unless their profit margins are improved, this will not work. And then government actually agreed to that. So we actually had to work simultaneously on all the fronts with all the stakeholders and keep on updating that system as well. So at the inception level, there was a complete engagement of the government. We should have actually involved the FPS owners and their associations as well at the conceptualization stage, but we did not do that. That was a lessons learned. The implementation, as I just talked. Then evaluation and advocacy, we conducted the assessments, and then we had a national level cross-learning workshop, where the findings not only of this pilot, but wherever such innovations were happening, they were presented. And then we actually came out with a best practice solution, where we just said that our project had these plus points, but there are some other things which actually were better in some other areas. As well as there are lots of ecological changes which happen during the implementation of project itself, and that those also have to be incorporated. And then the scale up. So where scale up, we said that don't just replicate the Raigada experience, but try and scale it up using as a best practice model. And this best practice model was pretty flexible. Somebody just quoted that two things. One is that there is no point in doing pilots unless there is a scale up. This was the premise that was there right from the beginning. And the second point was, unless we push the scale up, it won't happen. If we just give it to the government, it is not going to happen. So we have to really give them a roadmap that if we have to scale this up, what really it takes. What is the kind of funds which will be required? What can be the best approach to really scale up? If in case, for example, if we have said that using Aadhaar platform is the best practice, but in a state where the percentage of Aadhaar registration is just 30%, how are you going to implement it? So what is the solution in that case? Whereas in Kerala, where the percentage of Aadhaar penetration was 95%, why not go live on Aadhaar then? Right? So this kind of flexibilities we had to build in the solution and then hand it over to the government, saying that this is the kind of solution where you have a roadmap for all possibilities. I won't say all, but most of the possibilities in the country, and what is the way forward. So, I mean, these are some of the project activities which actually are described here, right from the community awareness campaigns, the training. It actually really was extremely difficult in the sense that in Raigada, most of the population is tribal. They do the all forest kind of works, and so even the fingerprints at times, they did not really come out. So there were lots of challenges, and there were huge number of learnings which were provided, and we continuously kept on refining our systems and our responses on this. So this is one example of the ration card which was used. So each member is actually represented here. The deduplication process as well as use of online web-based MIS actually really reduced the number of beneficiaries to a great extent. I mean, it was like the exclusion errors were reduced to the tune of 10%, which actually saved a lot of amount for the government as well. While the project was being implemented, I talked about ecological changes because we actually envisaged this project for 3 years. However, we could not complete this project in 3 years because of the mammoth task of registration. Now that Aadhaar is there, so this task is taken out, and now it becomes much more simpler to really replicate. However, some of the changes which actually happened in the ecology, we had to take cognizance of those, and some were actually enablers. And enablers were naturally the Aadhaar penetration, then improving electricity connectivity. Just now it was mentioned in the earlier session that this is one of the success. And rural connectivity, and the POS devices at the rural level, they just take 2 hours of electricity to really get charged, and mobiles are being used everywhere. So then improving data connectivity, which actually were enablers for using the technology. And the other operating changes in the environment were National Food Security Bill, which actually was an advantage as well as a disadvantage in the sense that it actually needed a lot of rework on the entire beneficiary registration part because APL, BPL, AAY, that categorization had gone. But it also provided opportunity to really do it afresh. So some states really were ready to go across, full board to identify the beneficiaries right from the scratch. Then end-to-end computerization scheme also started, and state also, the country also geared up towards direct benefit transfer. So these were some of the enablers. So this is my last slide, where we actually really need to talk and understand and think about the scale-up and sustainability and what are the critical points that have to be really taken into account. And so the key questions for scalability of a pilot, I would like to really read these out. First is credibility. How credible is the evidence? If the evidence is not credible, we cannot really advocate, and we should not really advocate. Then how well are the results documented? And has the pilot been implemented in the type of environment required for scale-up? These are usually things which are brought up by policy makers. Usually we run a technology project in the vicinity of, let's say, NCR somewhere. And then we say that, yeah, fantastic, it is working, but then if you take it to some remote area, it won't work. Everybody knows that. And so one has to really see and take the cognizance of the diversity that actually is there across the country. And so see that if in case the pilot is not implemented in such an environment, how we are going to advocate for scale-up. Then relevance, this is the most important thing. The scale-up and sustainability will happen only if what pilot is really doing is answering the question, answering a known gap, which is perceived as a gap by the government, by the society, by all the stakeholders. And that's where the relevance is extremely important. And for 2005 evaluation gaps which were identified, Raigada was basically one of the solutions, which actually has, I mean, lots of learnings of Raigada have got incorporated into many of the policies which actually are coming for rather for end-to-end computerization as well as for NFSA. Then comparative advantage. So, I mean, there might be n number of solutions. If we are actually promoting the pilot, should we really compete or should we really collaborate? So that is also one aspect which is extremely important, because if the pilot definitely has comparative advantage over many existing solutions, yes, promote for that. But if it does not have, like Raigada did not have, there were many other learnings which actually were incorporated for scale-up when we advocated for scale-up. Then stakeholder convenience is of utmost importance. The stakeholders in this case were the FPS owners who actually were using the POS machines or interaction with the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries themselves were the important stakeholder, and their convenience was most important. And I must say that for beneficiaries it was not extremely convenient. However, for FPS owners, once they were actually oriented, they were very comfortable with this. And they were also, I mean, those who were really happy to run the business honestly, they were extremely happy to have this kind of solution. And stakeholders, of course, the government machinery, they actually have to be trained on using the MIS. Here the systems, I mean, building a system of MIS was extremely important. And it actually, there was a period when the use of this entire system really went down, and as soon as MIS was upgraded, it again went up. There were political pressures and extremely high political pressures to really shut down this project because of the obvious reason of the leakages. However, just by use of the MIS and tracking and feedbacking very consistently, it actually really again came up. So that is one important aspect as well. And ease of scale-up. This is something which is actually really important, because how much is the alignment and compatibility with the current practices of the government? If it is completely opposite to the rules of the government, it's not going to happen. Then first thing is that you have to go and change the rules, which again is a different. So it's extremely important that if you work with some of the existing, let's say, existing policies or the safety nets, etc., the chances of scalability and sustainability are much more. Then the degree of adaptation and contextualization. As we say that in India, one size never fits all, and so whatever solution is given, it always needs adaptation. But what is the degree of adaptation which is required? What is the ease of adaptation? And what is the contextualization? And how easily, the level of efforts, all those things you have to really measure while you come out with the roadmap which is there for the sustainability and scale-up. And will it be difficult to maintain the basic values of pilot as expansion proceeds? This is extremely important. If you're compromising in the terms of contextualization, adaptability and scalability, if you are actually compromising the basic value for which the pilot was conceptualized, then there is no point in going ahead with the scalability. So these are some of the points to ponder, and that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important. Even the next, okay. No, thank you. I think one of the questions I wanted to dwell on as well is the scale actually look like the pilot when we see scale. And I think often the translation of pilots into scale interventions is a very interesting case study in itself. Jesh, you want to go up and sort of make your remarks? Thanks.
I have a disadvantage to speak last. So I'll take it as an advantage because you know time is being covered. I thought I'll speak more from the perspective of the work that we at RMC have been doing in terms of managing and designing large-scale programs. And we've had a very degree of success. And we thought really to share in terms of our experience of how it works, and a lot of it, I'm happy to see that resonates with the point that Ansa has raised in a very, very eloquent way. I think in terms of when we really do set out to look at a program, and we've designed some of the larger programs that have come in over the last couple of years, whether in terms of the health, whether in terms of water and sanitation, livelihood, forestry, natural resources, climate change. And if I distill in terms of looking at what approach that we take in comparison to programs that have been successful, have met results, then there are about 4 broad steps that we really look at. First, as we've really been looking at, is what we call the diagnostics. What we've really felt in terms of many of the programs, particularly in the basic services that are delivered, whether it be for livelihood, whether forest, health, there is a lot of preconceived notion in terms of what would work, and say, no, this is going to work and this is not going to work, without really drilling down onto what the ground realities are. Decision makers have a lot of ideas, have a lot of experience, but somewhere we feel that they've lost touch with the ground. And the ground realities have changed tremendously. I mean, in 12 years that RMC has been working, and we've gone to, often to same villages. And the data that we collected, in 2006 and data that we collected in 2012 on socio-economic parameters is vastly different. And if we say that this is a village, this is an area, this is a block, this is a district that we very well know of because we designed that program, 6 years ago, we're extremely surprised in terms of when we go out and find in the same block, same district, and the ground situation has changed completely in terms of the assets, in terms of the aspirations, in terms of the benefits that want to be accrued to that particular community. So the situational assessments, as we call it, are absolutely critical. To give you an example, one of the projects that we really are engaged with on child rights, and the situational assessment came out, which is not, again, when we do talk about situational assessments, they've not done too well. The project set out the resources, project set out the systems, project set out the partnerships. Based on that situational assessment, it said there were going to be 500,000 child laborers in a particular, 4 or 5 of these states that this program was working in. And when we did the baseline, you would be surprised, based on a census which the implementing agency did, and based on a baseline which was more on a sampling that we did, the actual numbers that came out on that was just 40,000. So, you go back and step out and say, what happened to the situational assessment? We were talking about, lakhs of child labor in the air, and you don't find them. And then you are really changing the entire, program set. So that's situational assessments in all criticality for us as part of the diagnosis are very, very important. I think once we do talk about the scale, we do talk about the sustainability, as the previous speakers have talked about. More or less, we're talking about working with the government. And if the government, in a way that we do look at and what we realize is an issue, most donors, most programs are really looking at outcomes. But as an implementing agency, most government departments are really looking and working towards creating outcomes. So do they understand that difference? Do we really have systems and procedures? Do they have the capacity to really work towards the outcome rather than the outputs? The other factor as part of diagnosis, which is quite critical, and more from a practitioner's perspective, and our bread and butter depends on that, are not adequately resourced. That's something, again, you're designing a $1 billion or $500 million or $400 million program, and you're spending 15-20 lakhs for a design. You can imagine what you could get out of that. I think post this, and once you do look at, and I'll skip the interim steps in between, But one of the key aspects, even before we really look at in terms of implementing the activities, would really be the augmentation phase. Is the implementing agency aligned to deliver outcomes? Do they understand what kind of OD mechanisms that need to really be put in, what kind of teams that really need to be put in? Leadership, is that aligned to the goals of the program or the project that we're really looking at? And most importantly and critically is the communication system prior to a large-scale program in terms of with the targeted community. I would not like to use the word beneficiaries, but the kind of stakeholders that there are. In terms of, do they really understand that this is a program that's coming in, and are they really prepared to accept and demand that particular program in here? Linked to this is, as the program really looks in, and this requires continuous kind of strengthening or capacity building that we really look at. The strengthening is the third phase. We really look at the capacities of the different layers of implementation. The normal mode is more kind of in cascade mode, and like Chinese whispers, the things that you start really want to reach out to the ground, like Chinese whispers, things get lost. You realize that things do get lost as you go from one stage to the next, either because of leakages, either because they don't really understand whether it is a guideline, whether it is a template, whether it is a policy. That distinction in terms of what adaptability that is required at the ground level, which are the program design is beautifully structured, but as it goes down, it gets more and more rigid and more jacketed into various compartments. So really, how do we continuously build and strengthen and build capacities to really make that communication very, very as part of the entire approach, we've seen that, and I'm sure people who have the design projects and have implemented projects have seen documents. We go out and say monitoring is a very important topic, communication is a very important topic, learning systems, process documentation. But for a program, somewhere some very, very wise man or woman or a team of designers, they came up with this kind of a ceiling that there should be for monitoring and evaluation or for communication. So depending on what really you are looking at, a 2% or a 3% on monitoring and evaluation, where you really want the people to draw out their blood and give it to you instead of the data that comes out. So really, in terms of, are we adequately resourcing in terms of the monitoring systems? Are they adequately resourced? Communication systems, are they adequately resourced? One clear example, I don't know if you're aware, we do hear about the Swachh Bharat mission. About 15%, or even under the total sanitation campaign, 15% of the money was allocated under the IEC button. How much of that was it spent? State by state, not more than 3 to 4% maximum. Why? Because they didn't know what and how to spend that money. So again, even if it was resourced, but there was no system in terms of communicating out into the beneficiaries on how they can really articulate the demand and the supply side we need to really look at. I think there's very interesting approaches that are really coming up. Pradhan mentioned about this whole environment and ecology that has changed in terms of when we started, a very short period, about 3 or 4 years. And we've really looked at in terms of the monitoring systems, and I'm sure people here at Samuji, the organizers, they've done a lot of work in monitoring and evaluation. Is start really looking at double loop communication instead of just this one way down and this is the data we want, but what data and what stories that data is telling us is sometimes missing. So that whole emphasis on quality and quantitative and qualitative data. And that's where the use of technology, and we've really looked at, and over the last 1.5 years, we've piloted some of the systems on how do we really transfer knowledge as part of the capacity building program so that we can really address the whole issue of Chinese whispers and see really what's happening on the ground. And two, again, using that same platform really to extract not only just the data but also the stories with it. Last as part of the kind of four-stage process is what we call the reflection and review. Most in terms of happening, if you're especially in the context of the government that we do talk about, it's always the physical and financial progress for a particular project, and that's about it. Some data, very selectively, any studies or evaluations are very selectively used and say to only project the project has been so very successful. It's mostly anecdotal, it is not evidence-based, and that's something that we need to really address as part of the, as I spoke earlier about the monitoring and evaluation system, need to be a double loop learning. Something that we really found very useful as part of the work that we do under the sanitation program, the Global Sanitation Fund that we manage, has been the after-action review. So every quarter, all the partners, come together. It's a massive exercise. We work across 18 districts and 3 states. And every quarter and then quarter, we really take stock in terms of what has changed, what kind of new innovations that have come in, helps cross-learning. Now, I'm not saying that this needs to be really replicated, but at the program level, we really need to find points where we could really look at, reflect, and review on what's happening, and particularly in the whole context when we do talk about the impact, when we do talk about the scalability and sustainability of that particular impact. Is the line almost? Yeah. This, okay, I'll skip to the I think one other thing that we really need to be, and I'm very conscious of the kind of work, and we as an organization, if I do want to really kind of scale up, is screen the lack of capacity, the lack of capabilities that you find outside. I'm sure, like most of you, when you've either already experienced it at the panel, or as you will for some of the younger lot who I see here, it's very difficult to identify and get a quality resource. Right? That is limited by, it's not that they're not available, it is limited by what I can expect the system as a recognition of the services that we provide. Right? The era, one of the UN reports that has this phrase, and I quite like it. I think we need to really end the era of cheap, and something that, why do we always really look at when we are finding and designing a project? The government insists that we should only pay minimum wages to the laborers that would be engaged in our EGA. That's a minimum wage, for God's sake. It is not what they deserve. They may deserve much more. So really, to be looking at what kind of systems from a quality perspective is something that we really need to be talking about if we are looking at sustainability and scalability for people to engage with that quality. Okay, I'll wind up there.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off.
Something that we can always take advantage of doing batchmates. So.
Yes, very close friends. I'm going to open it up to the audience, but I have, I have many questions of my own, but I'm going to see if anyone else has one question they want to start with. Otherwise, I'm going to start with mine. One observation I'm going to make, and this is, I guess, my personal sort of piece on system strengthening, is when I was working on a hand washing program, trying to look at how you integrate with public sector, doing something like, I think Mr. Iyer was talking about was, Unilever and a partnership with the state. We were told, well, go to Vietnam, there's a really successful project there, you should just go and see how the innovations have worked there. So we went to Vietnam and we studied the project for, looked at it very closely, and we realized that the innovations and nature of the innovation in Vietnam was actually not that great. I mean, in India, we were doing far, far more innovative design, working with Unilever, with Dettol, taking the best of, communication capabilities, working with communities, stuff like that. The problem was that in Vietnam, when you went to the state leadership and said, okay, I want, to roll this out through schools, it was a matter of one memo and maybe one speech, and suddenly everyone down to the commune level, it rolled out, and there were systems that existed that were so strong within of course, it's a communist government, and we don't want a communist government, or maybe those are the advantages of being, the disadvantages of being in a democratic government. But I think from that point, for me, was, the relevance of sort of strong systems is that, the value of innovations becomes far, far greater where you don't have very strong systems, and you're trying to sort of, address those gaps, or trying to figure out how to work within the weakness of existing situations, systems. And I think many of the points that we've addressed here bring that up. I have one or two questions of, I wanted to ask. Here is one of the points that, Jayesh, you talked about was about outputs versus outcomes. And I think from a health perspective, I often see this as issues about rights, about dignity, about quality of care, which typically systems don't necessarily embrace as being very important. They much more embrace outputs, the numbers of, people immunized, the number of, sterilization cases, the number of, safe deliveries, done, live births. Now, whether or not I abused that mother and I slapped, her during delivery, or I told her not to scream, or whether I left the lady who was, having a sterilization lying outside on the grass, after I've locked up the OT, or whether I have discriminated against, Mahadalit communities when I go out to do immunization sessions. Those don't really become the core of, of our systems. And I just would like to get the entire panel's view on how do you sort of, maybe address those systems issues to try and deal with the softer aspects of, dignity, rights, and quality. How do you get systems to be better responsive to those issues, recognizing that there are weaknesses?
When it comes to the softer aspects, because currently we are not actually equipped to deal with softer things, because we don't actually in our planning really count what are the software aspects of programs or implementation plans. So one important issue here, that's the street level bureaucracy is a concept, wherein we think decision making is done by the governing organizations or the individuals, but actually the decision is made by those ANMs or by those Anganwadi workers, or sometimes those Achas, sometimes the teacher who deals with the student. So the actual decision making when it comes to the implementation of a policy happens at the grassroots level. So unless we envisage how to make that, so that's this complexity thing that I was trying, and also the understanding the systems thinking process. So we have to put up systems for that level as well. So when it comes to a discrimination to a Mahadalit, or ill treatment of a mother, whatever those kind of things are, so the capacity building aspect, the institutions needs to be there very well. And those institutions need adequate human resources to address, for example, grievance redressal cell, that I can take as one example. So if you have a grievance redressal cell at a district level, it will not work, because the actual grievances will be at the very grassroots level, may not be having public transport or other facilities to come, or time, the luxury of time to come and see the particular official at the district level. So unless we have a grievance redressal system and the capacities to run that grievance redressal system developed within that village level, problems will not solve. So the institutions cannot be limited to some levels. It needs to be at the level of implementation to the phase of the program. I think that's one of it.
Well, I'll just add two in terms of the experience that we've had in the sanitation and the livelihood space. Not as dark really in terms of the health. But I think two really, one is, in a way, just to extend and add on to the excellent point Raman Sir made, is more in terms of creating accountability at all levels. So are we accountable to, not only in terms of the numbers that we're giving in, as he mentioned as part of the community health workers at the ASHAs, ANMs really being paid an X amount of rupee for each successful delivery, but being engaged in this whole program, and there are very interesting experiments that are ongoing at the moment, as I understand. But critically is also the perspective on how we communicate of what those rights and what those responsibilities are. In the sanitation space that we do talk about, and I'm sure my colleague here would have yesterday when we talked about this Global Sanitation Fund, the communication that has gone into the villages is that for every toilet you would get 12,000 rupees, right? But in terms of how, when, at what time, nobody knows. Everybody is just waiting of 80 to 85% of the villages that we go to and villages that we interact with. First interaction is, give us the money and we will construct, right? But how that money is going to be translated, beyond the video, as you talked about the second point that you raised in terms of the institutions, that information exchange, that communication is something that we really need to be able to do it much more effectively, especially the kind of resources and the kind of mediums that are available at the moment. So these are two I thought in terms of really looking at how do we communicate and what kind of accountability within the institutions at different levels is something that we can really look at, because at the end of the day we all know that the adage of saying what gets monitored gets done. So you are monitoring sterilization, you're monitoring birds, they will get done. If you start asking, have you been humane in this, and the community, I'm sure they would start really recognizing that.
I think unlike health or Anganwadi centers, the problem we were dealing with was quite different. It was corruption. It was precisely corruption. And to be honest with you, the viability studies which we actually did, it really showed that the profits that they are getting out of honest earnings was just like in the range of 200 rupees a month to something like 1,200, 2,000 or so. So can anybody really survive? And can you really tell them that you actually are blocking the entitlements and rights of people, rights to food, when they themselves are really deprived? And so, they are doing corruption, of course, and don't ask me the amount of money that they are making out of corruption. So the whole premise and even the negotiations with these organizations, the associations and all were extremely interesting. However, there were two advantages of using technology. One was, we actually said that it's a portability, which the concept where it's like I can actually decide, a beneficiary can decide which shop I want to go. I can access the food from anywhere. So naturally, those shop owners who don't behave properly, who are not really providing the services which are up to the mark, they actually get clientele which is smaller and the profit margins naturally go low. So, that is a kind of natural selection which, through that competitive spirit, it helps. However, it's a distant dream. It is not going to be scaled up across because it will take another at least 3-4 years. Now that there are conducive environment with new ruling for Aadhaar, so we still have some hopes. That is A. The second is actually increasing this profit margin. It is like the negotiation with the government was extremely crucial, because we say that if we have to say that you from tomorrow start using POS, and we know that this man will die if he really uses POS, how can we really negotiate? And so there actually having some respectable profit margins for them was a kind of negotiation which we really had to push a lot with the government. And then we also had to conduct different studies for different states. For example, we did it in Orissa and we did it in Kerala. For both places, looking at the cost of living and all the recommendations were quite different. However, at least in Orissa, we could say that the government was pretty acceptable, and they're acceptable to the recommendations, and they are actually scaling up these reforms across the state. So, to an extent, yes, some efforts actually could be done, but there are huge challenges if we really talk about it.
So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sashit from Energy Strategy Consulting. This is more of a remark, especially on the from a model phase to a scale-up phase. How do we transit and the type of innovations that we have in India? India is a land of innovation. Like we have like thousands of innovation in each state. But what we need to understand is some innovations are not to be scaled up. They are very good for a particular region or for a particular community. What needs to be done is probably document them and use it as a as a stepping stone to build up new ideas or to build up a better innovation which can be scaled up at a state or a national level. What unfortunately happens is these innovations are always a brainchild of an organization or individual person. They hold it very close to their heart. It's understandable, but then you have to let it go. That really doesn't happen. We have seen scale up like from Methane to Asha. Methane had its own efficiency and has its own charm. Asha has lost some of it, but then someone had to let go so that Asha could be formed. Okay, but now I also have clients who work in different sectors. They like one example, one of my clients was working towards Bal Panchayat. Now they have created very nice Bal Panchayat who work in water and sanitation in a particular area in Rajasthan. Worked very well. They wanted me to develop an advocacy document so that it can be scaled up nationally. I said, don't lose the charm here. Okay, document it, give it to the government, tell them that this is how it works, but this cannot be scaled up at the national level because motivation level and the requirement differs from region to region. Somehow that needs to be addressed, and we need to understand that as when we're designing it or implementing it. I think that was just a remark that I wanted to make.
No, I think really excellent point. I think being realistic. I mean, that was a lot of my questions as well. How do we know what the capabilities are? How are we being realistic about scale? Does innovation, when it gets scaled up, actually get translated truly, or does it? I mean, you're right. India is a land of pilots, but it's also it's also a graveyard of pilots because we do them and they don't scale up, and then it's considered as a failure rather than, I like the phrase you're using, which is let it go. I'm going to wind up there because I think we're just on time or just a little bit over time. I'm just going to thank my panelists. Really, I think it was a great sort of session. I enjoyed hearing the different perspectives, frankly, and not just having sort of one thematic lens to it. So thank you very much, and thank you to the audience as well. Thank you.